Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 5, and today we're taking a look at the 2022 BMW i4 eDrive40. Now, production of this started in October 2021. It's a 5-door lift-back body style car, and it's in the compact executive class. And this is the 5th BMW i brand sub-model after the i3, i8, iX and i7, although since this was launched there has been 2 more, the iX3 and the i5, and apparently there's an iX2 coming at some point as well. And yeah, this has McPherson strut suspension up front and multi-link suspension at the rear. It's also got a almost completely flat underbody, which improves drag coefficient, so this car is really rather quite efficient at getting through the air, so that just increases the battery range. And it has a 45% front and 55% rear weight distribution. And yeah, it's more biased towards the rear because this is a rear-engined, rear-wheel drive only version electric car. I say rear engine because obviously the motor is at the rear, and the electric motor is the engine of this car, with the batteries being the fuel, to put it into context of a combustion engine vehicle. So yeah, this is more the lower end spec model, as there is only one other model version of this car below this, the eDrive35, and then there's the xDrive40 above this and the M50 above that. So yeah, more lower range kind of car, but that's no real bad thing. This means that this is a car that is more everyday rather than your more hypercars and supercars that you're unlikely to see. Although unfortunately it seems to have the same problem with the iX, where it doesn't seem to have a frunk at all here. And I don't imagine there is going to be one, even if you took all that plastic off, because that wouldn't seem very convenient to have to take all that off to put something in. So yeah, it doesn't seemingly have a frunk like the iX, which again does not seem like a forward-thinking kind of thing to be doing. But yeah, in comparison to the eDrive35, for instance, this has 335 horsepower and 317 pounds-feet of torque. Now the eDrive35 has 282 horsepower. The xDrive40 that's above this has 396 horsepower, as well as all-wheel drive, as it is a dual-motor car. And the M50 that is above that has 536 horsepower, again with an all-wheel drive setup because it has 2 motors. So yeah, but it is interesting that this is a rear-wheel drive, rear-engine car. You know, BMW have never done rear-engine before, unless you count the BMW i7, which I don't even think that was rear-wheel drive. That might have been side-engined, to be honest, with the way that layout was on that. But regardless, yeah, it's a nice interior on this car. There's not many physical buttons, which is a bit of a shame, but it's still nicely done, nice and clear and cut on all that. It's got a decent amount of rear leg room, but not a huge amount. As you can see, it looks a little bit tight in there, but you do get a huge amount of rear boot space, as you can see, which does somewhat make up for the lack of a frunk. But if it did have a frunk, at least then you could slightly downsize the rear boot space to make the rear leg room space a little bit better as well. But still, I like the fact they've gone for a lift back, as that does increase the amount of space you can put in this car, or stuff in this car, and yeah, that does make it a far more practical vehicle than otherwise it would have been. Looks wise, do prefer it to the iX because it's not got quite as gopping of grills, but yeah, they're still too big, especially for an electric car, because at the end of the day you don't need that much cooling, although you can adjust the amount of cooling that the grills do generate. But at the end of the day you don't need anywhere near as much as a combustion engine, and yeah, it just looks like a really lazy form of making an electric car. An electric car, at the end of the day, I feel, as much as I want them to look like ordinary cars, they also don't need to have ordinary car elements to them. Don't really need big grills or anything like that, and yet BMW have stuck with it for this car as well as the iX, which is a bit of a shame, because overall I do like the look of this car. I like the headlights, the side profile looks pretty good, and then the rear end looks really rather nice as well. It's nowhere near as busy as some cars from BMW has been, but yeah, those front grills do not do this car any justice. But nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see what this car can do. So yeah, this is by no means the fastest electric car that we have on this game, with only 335 horsepower. It's, I think, one of the lowest horsepower cars that we've had from an electric car on this game. It could well, in fact, be the lowest. I just haven't quite looked into it that much, but still, it's got a decent amount of get up and go, but only being rear-wheel drive does mean that it doesn't quite have the excellent launch of some of the all-wheel drive electric cars that we have on this game. But still, let's see what it can do on this drag strip, and then we'll go around the track. So, yeah, the rear engine, rear wheel drive layout does mean that this car, handling wise, is probably a little bit on the more agile side, because you don't have any, you know, motors up front restricting the turning or anything like that. But like I said, it does limit the launch, it does limit the amount of power you can get out of this car, and as you can see, it's only got 118 mph top speed, which, yeah, isn't the highest by any means. You know, Rivian with their R1T is quicker than that. Pretty sure the iX had a higher top speed than that as well. Just trying to find out. Yes, that had 125 mph top speed, but granted that did have 516 horsepower. So yeah, we've got slightly more power, so therefore it's going to have slightly higher top speed. But at the end of the day, this is a far better handling car than the iX ever was. Yeah, weighing in at 4,680 pounds means it's significantly lighter than a lot of other electric cars that we've had on this game. And yeah, far lighter than the iX. So even though it's not got quite the power of some of the electric cars on this game, it's certainly by no means a heavy car, which does somewhat make up for that. So yeah, we're in B class, lower end B class, and then there's the main stats in terms of horsepower and torque and the like. But yeah, they're the overall stats, which as you can see aren't majorly brilliant, but trust me, the car does handle properly well. So that 4.7 handling is a little bit of an underestimate as far as I'm concerned, but the rest of it is pretty much in line, because the brakes aren't particularly brilliant, and yeah, the launch or the acceleration off the line isn't all that great either. It does take a while to, you know, get going, quite frankly, which does mean that it's not the quickest of cars in an initial race. But once you are on the move and you combine the instantaneous use of the electric power with the handling, then you do have a pretty good car in the mid-range clout area. But nonetheless, let's see what this car sounds like, and then we'll talk about it some more. So yeah, it is interesting that BMW has gone for a rear-wheel drive saloon car even when it comes to an all-electric vehicle. Now, obviously this isn't the only version of this car you can get. Obviously you can get all-wheel drive as well. But yeah, the fact that we've got a rear-wheel drive all-electric saloon from BMW does kind of intrigue me, and yeah, it is the only rear-wheel drive electric car that we have on this game. Now granted, it's not the only electric car that only has rear-wheel drive in the world. You know, the likes of the Honda E certainly has a rear-wheel drive only, but yeah, on this game that is not something that's common, and yeah, it does make for a nice change. Now unfortunately you can't actually convert the car into all-wheel drive on this game, so you do have to stick with the rear-wheel drive element, but trust me, once you start upgrading the handling and the like, this does become a really rather excellent handling car. So yeah, it's well worth checking out for the upgrades that you can do this car, but even standard it is pretty fun to drive, even if the top speed isn't particularly great. But yeah, acceleration wise is still decent, even though it's not the best. 0 to 60 is dealt with in 5.517 seconds. 0 to 100 is dealt with in 13.050 seconds. And as you've seen, you can go to a top speed of 118 miles an hour, which is not the slowest by any means in terms of electric cars. Plenty of electric cars can only do like 99 or 100 miles an hour, something like that. So yeah, 118 is still more than enough on a day-to-day basis, and yeah, does give you a little bit of an edge over most other electric cars. And but if you are after more top speed, then the M50 can apparently do 140 plus. So yeah, which I'm sure plenty of people will also enjoy, especially with its all-wheel drive goodness and huge amount of extra power over this. It's got, you know, 200 horsepower or more than this does, so which is obviously quite a lot. But yeah, overall I really like this car. It makes up for the iX in a lot of ways. Granted, I'm not still 100% sold on the looks, but that, in all honesty, is the only real issue I have with this car. because the handling is good. It's got decent mid-range clout. Once you get up and go in a race, the handling more than makes up for the lack of acceleration. And yeah, it's overall just a fun car to drive, especially when you give it some upgrades, which I have done, by the way, in B class. Yes, I kept it in B class, and yet, despite still only having the same amount of power and torque, it is actually a pretty good car with all the handling upgrades I've given it. So yeah, not sure whether or not I will be racing this online given the newly released Forza Motorsport game. But this isn't going to be the last car I review on this game, by the way, because we do have the Rivian R1S to look at, and who knows what the future holds for the next festival playlist, which could well have new cars to that game that aren't added into the new Forza Motorsport. So yeah, not completely out of this game yet, but yeah, we're not going to be on it for a huge amount of time, outside of maybe the Extreme Off-Road Silver Build series. But still, this car is well worth getting. It is a really fun car to drive, especially if you're into EVs, which I am. So I am glad it has been added to the game. Just a shame it's been added quite late into the game's life. Nonetheless though, thank you for watching. You can get this car by getting only 20 points in the festival playlist. Well worth getting. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.